Thank you very much. It's nice to see all these lovely faces, all my fellow fledgling Buddhas. Well, I'm going to start off with a quote by one of the greatest minds of the 20th century and 21st century, Kate Bush. Because I'm wired up like Kate Bush, you see, like she was in concert. So I'm not going to sing it. You'll be pleased to know. I think I would probably clear the room. And it's fitting with all the great teachers we have here and the things that we're hearing. And this is about teachers. It's from a song, Them Heavy People. They arrived at an inconvenient time. I was hiding in a room in my mind. They made me look at myself. I saw it all. I'd shut the people out of my life. So now I take the opportunities, wonderful teachers ready to teach me. For now I realise everyone has a heaven inside. I love the whirling of the dervishes. I love the beauty of rare innocence. You don't need no crystal ball. Don't fall for a magic wand. We humans got it all. We perform the miracles. Although we don't look at miracles quite in the same way as probably the Christians do. So I thought I'd start with that. I'm going to do the rest of it in Bolton dialect. So I'll do it all by racket thee, lads. Right, okay? No, not really. Living in the presence of the soul. As inhabitants of this planet, we tend to live in a kind of dream, weaving a web of illusion. Quite a few quotes. I tend to say to myself, don't use quotes, and then I tend to use more than I intend to do. It's just one of my little foibles, I'm afraid. So the statement in the title is probably the most practical one for all of us to follow. It really sums up the whole of this week, living in the presence of the soul. Of course, the expression soul is open to many interpretations. In the Key to Theosophy, HPB mentions the many principles of man. She talks about the higher self as being Atma, the inseparable ray of the universal and one self. It is the God above more than within us. Happy the man or woman, they always say man, I don't know, who succeeds in saturating his inner ego with it. And then she mentions the spiritual divine ego. And this is the spiritual soul, or buddhi as we call it, in close union with manas, the mind, without which it is no ego at all, but only the atmic vehicle. And then she goes on to mention the other principles, the lower principles. But so to live in the presence of the soul, to me, means to cultivate the mind so that it becomes illumined by the light of buddhi, or the intuition. I think they call it manasa tajasa, something like that. It's illumined by the light of the intuition. So we have two aspects to our mind, of course, as most people know. The lower mind that deals with all the mundane things like, where am I going to get my shopping from, and what's on television, and all this kind of thing. And then we have the higher mind, which is inspired by art, beautiful art, poetry, music, and spiritual matters. So it is this spiritual soul that H.P. Blavatsky is encouraging us to live in the light of. Our task in the great journey is to awaken to what we truly are in essence and live in the light of that realization. It's a bit like a saying of the Zen master, Bankei, that we should not striving to become Buddhas, but striving to remain as Buddhas. Because what we imagine ourselves to be here and now, at this moment, is not what we are in reality. As Plato says, all true learning is merely recollection. It's just a remembering, an awakening. Now, Robert Crosby, who was the founder of the United Lodge of Theosophists, wrote this: Theosophy is the only philosophy that can be used in every direction in daily life. It can be used in all directions, high or low, because that use comes from an understanding of the Spirit itself, from acting for that self and as that self in every direction. All else flows into line. All the destruction that is around us, all the misery that we see, has been brought about by our denial of the Holy Ghost, our denial of the Spirit within us. We deny it when we act as if we are just our bodies or our minds. That, T-H-A-T, capital T-H-A-T, that will not be denied. So a man, meeting all the results of that denial and seeing them to be evil, learns that this is not the way. Then he seeks for truth, and finding the truth, obtains all that he can desire: hope, happiness, and a better understanding of his and all existence. It was to give to men all that they could take in regard to the nature of the soul, that they might come out of the veil of sorrow, that those beings known as divine incarnations have descended here of their own will. They have carried forward from age to age this knowledge of nature and of man and of the purpose of life, learned through many civilizations of mankind. It is this knowledge which makes them as gods to us in their glory and their power. So that's the end of the quote. So we need to begin to try to begin to act as spiritual beings. It's this try, isn't it? Try. We don't. It doesn't mean we're going to become spiritual beings like that. But once we start to try, then the seeds have been planted. It may take one life, it may take 10 lives, it may take 100 lives, but we have to plant the seed. If you want to grow things in your garden, you plant the seed. You don't not plant a seed and think, why are the flowers not growing? You know, it's common sense. And the greatest gift that we can give to others is to help them to awaken to what they truly are in their essence, to help them to awaken to their own inherent divinity, and to teach them that far from being weak, miserable sinners, as the Christian Church tries to tell us, they are in fact children of the light and immortal in their true nature. Well, we are all immortal in our true nature. So it needs people who are alive to the essence of theosophical teaching to make it a living reality in their daily lives. And this can't be done by just giving them facts from books. HPB says in her messages to the American conventions that orthodoxy in theosophy is a thing neither possible nor desirable. It is a diversity of opinion within certain limits that keeps the Theosophical Society a living and healthy body, its many other ugly features notwithstanding. Shows a little dig there, you see. Were it not also for the existence of a large amount of uncertainty in the minds of students of Theosophy, such healthy divergences would be impossible. and the society would degenerate into a sect in which a narrow and stereotyped creed would take the place of the living and breathing spirit of truth and an ever-growing knowledge. Lovely words. So this is extremely important to take on board. Even in the Theosophical Society, we have people who criticise other people's way of thought, a way of looking at the teachings. But we have no right to do this. There is no really set way to approach them. So long as we are studying the teachings of HPB and the Masters and the original ideas behind the Theosophical Society, we have to try to use our intuitions to extract the essence and make it a living reality in our lives. The failure of most of the major religions is that most of the followers have fallen into the dead letter of the teachings and killed the living spirit. If you can kill a spirit. It is also easy to do this with the secret doctrine and other works of the founders and spiritual teachings. This is because we feel that gathering information and remembering facts concerning Theosophy is actually understanding what Theosophy is in reality. Also, we tend to speak with authority, as though we know these things, when in fact we are often only repeating what we have read in books. I mean, there may be people here who actually know, what you know, there may be some great adepts sat here somewhere. But in general, I'm speaking for myself anyway. It's and HPB in the Voice of the Silence talks about the fact that it's the real thing is thus have I heard rather than thus do I know. It's a rather complex situation, as of course we must trust in the words of the Masters in the same way that children must trust their teachers. Otherwise their view on the world will be based upon wrong conclusions. There's a film called Dogtooth, which I wouldn't advise people to watch. It's rather an adult watch, but it's about these parents that bring their children up in this enclosure, and they give them all the wrong information. They tell them that, for example, that planes that look that big in the sky are actually that big, so they try and reach up and touch them. And someone once came in and told them about zombies, and the parents didn't want them to know about anything like that. So these were actually children, they're in the 20s, and this young lad said, "Well, what are zombies?" And she went and pointed to a flower. She said, "That flower there is a zombie." So she began to believe that the flowers were zombies. So what I'm trying to say is that you can, you know, it's words and images. You can give people wrong views of things, and people can get wrong ideas. Because we just name things, you know, and we could call something anything. So as our teachers, we need to trust them, but also to bring our own intuitions into play, so that we don't fall into the dead letter that kills. But just think of the orthodox scientists who go through the motions and follow slavishly what they have learned at university, etc. Most great breakthroughs in science are accomplished by unorthodox scientists, many who were at first laughed to scorn by their compatriots. Yet most of them had been through the same initiatory training, but their understanding and use of it was more enlightened, and they could think out of the box. We can apply a similar insight to theosophical training too. Primarily, we as students of Theosophy should be thinking of ways to apply the teachings for the good of humanity as a whole. HPB in the quote I just used was warning us not to go the way of nearly all religions and philosophies and split into so many sects, each believing themselves to be right in the possession of truth. She even says that we should not expect to get the truth from the secret doctrine or any other spiritual teaching, but to see how far they can lead us towards the truth. They're like signposts. I always say that when you walk in the moors, you need the signposts, otherwise you might go in the wrong direction. You might be heading for one place. A signpost is very useful, but we have to do the walking. You know, the signpost can't do the walking for us. It'd be very odd. It would be like Dogtooth. This is very important to understand that words and ideas can never encompass the truth. This has to be realised and understood by each one of us individually. Another analogy that I always use in my talks, nearly, is that you don't know the taste of a strawberry until you put it in your mouth. You know, you can't go to strawberry lectures, and you can't go to strawberry seminars, and you can't read books about strawberries and know what the taste is. You can know about it. So, you know, you have to put the strawberry in your mouth before you can understand it. So Theosophy should teach the animal man or woman to be a human man or woman. So we tend to think that we're human, but to become human is something very, very special. Yes, we are swept away by the whirlwind of egotistic and mundane affairs. We are all very much children of our age, and we react and draw our opinions of situations in an orthodox way. Whereas as students of Theosophy, our worldview in many cases should be almost the opposite of the general run of humanity. As we hopefully are given by the Masters deeper insights into the human condition. But in most cases, though we speak of theosophical principles, we speak of them, and our lives don't often reflect them. So HPB and the Masters were very much aware of the trends that were emerging. She writes in an article, Our Cycle and the Next, if Theosophy prevailing in the struggle, its all-embracing philosophy, strikes deep root into the minds and hearts of men, if its doctrines of reincarnation and karma, in other words of hope and responsibility, find a home in the lives of the new generations, then indeed will dawn the day of joy and gladness for all who now suffer and are outcast. For real Theosophy is altruism, and we cannot repeat it too often. It is brotherly love, mutual help, unswerving devotion to truth. If once men do but realise that in these alone can true happiness be found, and never in wealth, possessions, or any selfish gratification, then the dark clouds will roll away, and a new humanity will be born upon earth. Then the golden age will be there indeed. And then she probably thinks we're getting too complacent, so she adds this warning. But if not, then the storm will burst, and our boasted Western civilization and enlightenment will sink into such a sea of horror that its parallel history has never yet recorded. Wow. And this emphasises the importance of the Theosophical Society and the work that it does. So all that we learn and that we understand should only be for the good of all. This should be our line of life meditation if we are to put Theosophy into practice. We should develop the power not just to feel ourselves as spiritual beings, but to feel it in others too. And to treat them accordingly as individuals and as groups. It's very easy to see that we do not live in a very compassionate society. It's certainly improved over past centuries with so many charitable organisations springing up, like the TOS and others. But the very fact that they have to appeal to the public for funding whilst billions are spent on wars and non-important things, like Olympics and football World Cups, shows that our priorities are wrong. I'm not saying these things aren't useful, but there's so much spent on wars, billions of pounds, and if the same money was channeled towards helping those who are suffering, what great work could be done. The present worldwide economic crisis may be due to the karmic effects of our obsession with money and the belief that it can solve every problem. Society certainly has a love of money And we all know that the love of money is the root of all evil. Money, 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 as the song goes. People live and die for bits of metal and paper, which have become the driving force of modern society. And those without it suffer at the hands of those who covet it. Compassion speaks and says, "Can there be bliss when all that lives must suffer? Shall thou be saved and hear the whole world cry?" As the voice of the silence tells us. And HPB wrote an article called "The Civilization, the Death of Art and Beauty," which is possibly my favourite HPB article. And in this she says, "Materialism and indifference to all save the selfish realisation of wealth and power and the overfeeding of national and personal vanity have gradually led nations and men to the almost entire oblivion of spiritual ideals, of the love of nature, to the correct appreciation of things." And here is one of her acid lines again. "Like a hideous leprosy, our Western civilization has eaten its way through all the quarters of the globe and hardened the human heart." Incredible. In this article, she shows that even in Victorian times, society put wealth before spirituality and nature. Since then, we have gone down in some ways. We are certainly not much different, and in many ways our hearts have been hardened generally. Of course, there will always be compassionate souls working for the good on various levels, but the fact that these people stand out shows that the failings of society in general. They stand out like stars in the dark sky. Also, we must remember above all that HPB says that we should never despair of the human race. No true Theosophist will ever do that. So don't despair of the human race. Through the internet and other improved methods of communication, we are becoming more aware of what is happening worldwide. And there is an outpouring of positive reaction to natural disasters or victims of war and acts of terrorism. That's one positive trend that's going on. The Masters said that they wanted a universal fraternity, a real brotherhood of humanity started. And Theosophy in action is making that our motive in all that we do. Even if we do little things like, I think HPB also like giving a cup of water to someone who needs it, and just little acts of kindness, helping people with their shopping. There was a big thing in the paper where I am about a boy who helped an old man home with his shopping, and it went viral. Just a simple act like that went viral because it's, as I said, it's such a rare thing. So to do this, we need to take the stance that we are spiritual beings, that in reality we are not creatures of a day or 25,000 days, but eternal beings. We're eternal beings. And this, of course, is the whole purpose of the secret doctrine, was to show us that fact, give us our place in nature. We can get lost in details. The mind can be lost in a labyrinth of words like a man in a thick forest, as the Crest Jewel of Wisdom by Shankaracharya says. So our minds can be swallowed up by details instead of grasping the essence and understanding the motive of the brotherhood of bodhisattvas that revealed it to the world under the guidance of Gautama Buddha, who is said to have initiated the attempt in the last quarter of the 19th century through H.P. Blavatsky. But the mind is the great slayer of the real, says the voice of the silence, and it finds countless ways to prevent us from seeing ourselves as spiritual beings. It gives us doubts and fears, but in all this we need to stand firm and remember who and what we really are. It's about awakening. We just need to wake up, to remember. Rumi says in one of his poems, wake up, don't go back to sleep. Wake up. There's a tendency to separate what we learn in our studies from actual practice, to take the same attitude to Theosophy that we do to studying maths or geography. But it is entirely different, of course. To repeat what HPB says in the Bowen Notes on how to study Theosophy, come to the SD, she says, without any hope of getting the final truth of existence from it, or without any idea other than seeing how far it may lead towards the truth. Seeing study a means of exercising and developing the mind never touched by other studies. And that's an interesting attitude. She is saying what all the esoteric and even some exoteric teachings say, that the truth is beyond words and can never, as I said, be encompassed by them. Now, people nowadays revel in learning facts. Our education system relies on memorizing facts. And even in spiritual traditions, people enjoy sitting back and absorbing facts that often make no difference whatsoever to their own lifestyles, though they often imagine they do. Or they repeat text parrot fashion. She goes on to say that we must keep the idea of the oneness of all things in our minds during our studies and not let any idea of separateness intervene. So it's getting to a state of mind where the teachings are alive, otherwise we fall into the dead letter. The main thing to do is, as Pythagoras says in his golden verses, and take heart, for the race of man is divine. Take heart, for the race of man is divine. In Theosophy, we learn about the origins of man and his destiny. We learn that we are now at a stage where we can proceed through self-induced and self-devised efforts. We've reached that stage. We need to take these ideas and breathe life into them through a conscious love and understanding of our fellow human beings, struggling along with us on this journey. Now, when I was in Bangor giving a talk, I'll give a bit of a trailer of this talk. I mentioned the Bodhisattva never despise, who I mentioned quite a lot. I read the Lotus Sutra some years ago, and I've read it once or twice, and I love the Bodhisattva never despise, because he was born at a time when Buddhism was in disrepute. It was the monks were living dissolute lives, and the nuns, and he wanted to preach true Buddhism. But he would be mocked. People would knock him to the ground, they would kick him, they would do all sorts of things. But he would always get up, look them in the face, look them in the eyes and says, I can never despise you because you will all be Buddhas someday. What an attitude. It made me realise the truth of Jesus' saying, all I ask of you is that you love others as I have loved you. All I ask of you. He also said, love your enemies, bless those that curse you, pray for those that despise you, and also despitefully use you. And also the Buddha also said that hatred does not cease by hatred, the hatred only ceases by love. And also Jesus said, don't forgive 7 times, but forgive 70 times 7 times. I don't know who would need it forgiving that many times, but who knows? But most of the society spends a lifetime believing it is something that it definitely is not. We are always exactly what we are, but clouds obscure the sun. And a society that has grown materialistic and bases its politics and education on the fact that we have only one life, I call it the one life theory, and the secret of success is the survival of the fittest, will always stifle the natural spirituality that we all have developed, have buried within us. We need to roll back the stone from the cave and step out into the light. Because no matter how complex our intellectuality is in this world, no matter how great our technology, our mental state is still mainly an animalistic one. In that we are taken up with food, finding a mate, reproduction, and making a nest. Look at all the dating, home building and cookery programs on TV and the internet. Well, these things are obviously important for the few years that we are here, but we must never be swallowed up by them. It's like a big dragon swallowing us, isn't it? HBB says in the Key to Theosophy, if the action of one reacts on the lives of all, and this is the true scientific idea, then it is only by all men becoming brothers and all women sisters, and that's the one time she mentions women, and by all practicing in their daily lives true brotherhood and true sisterhood, that the real human solidarity, which lies at the root of the elevation of the race, can ever be realised or attained. It is this action and interaction, this true brotherhood and sisterhood, in which each shall live for all and all for each, which is one of the fundamental theosophical principles every theosophist should be bound not only to teach, but to carry out in his or her individual life. And later on she states how we can achieve this: by the enlightened application of our precepts to practice, by the use of our higher reason, spiritual intuition and moral sense, and by following the dictates of what we call the still small voice of our conscience, which is that of our ego, and which speaks louder in us than the earthquakes and the thunders of Jehovah, wherein the Lord is not. In other words, live in the presence of our souls. Again, she emphasises the enlightened application of our precepts. For example, it's no use to become a vegetarian because a book tells you to, or because someone coerces you to. Otherwise, you may grow to resent it. You need to feel that you really want to be a vegetarian or a vegan as a result of feeling a compassion towards the animal kingdom. And this can be applied on all levels. And B.P. Wardia says it is a kind of spiritual anarchy. Most people tend to have a negative view of anarchy. I looked in the dictionary, and one of the definitions is: anarchy is a theory that regards the absence of all direct or coercive government as a political ideal, and that proposes the cooperative and voluntary association of individuals and groups as the principal mode of organised society. Interesting. And Leo Tolstoy remarked that if Western society had followed the teachings of Jesus, we would have no need for governments, armies or police forces. But we now have made a world in which they are necessary, and coercion takes the place of love and compassion. It's very much a coercive society. So we need to recover the dignity of being human on this shining globe of ours. And try to find our place in nature, as the secret doctrine tries to show us, for the purpose of becoming natural and recovering our sanity in a world growing more and more insane. Theosophy in action is helping others to awaken from this dream, which often becomes a nightmare for many. But in the centre of the storm, at the eye of the storm, there is a calmness that remains unshaken. And we can all find our way to that state. We do not progress by adding, but by subtracting those things that shield our vision. We are already there, but not aware. It's a little poem for you. Now you know I'm a poet. We're already there, but not aware. So the practical effects of studying Theosophy should be to give us a deeper understanding of nature and our fellow human beings. We should be better able to grasp the beauty and wonder of life beyond the seeming confusion. Just a bit of word of time. Masters could well see the effects of materialistic science and dogmatic religion at the time, and wanted us to gain some insight into the real workings of nature and the universe, so that we could better appreciate others and have compassion for those who stray. For as Jesus said, they know not what they do. That's quite true. If people are unaware of the spiritual nature and spiritual things, they know not what they do. They're basing everything upon the wrong premises. So to recap a little, the whole essence of what I've been saying is that most people in this world have not an inkling of what it means to be really human. It's like a strange fairy story where people walk about in a dream, going through the motions without really knowing why. They shut out the idea of death, for example. The Chinese poet Wen Xiang wrote, 100 years are like a long dream, and while in the dream, such rushing around. After awakening, we realised that it had been a dream, but never has it been known in the dream's own time. My life, now awakened, I don't remember the dream time. There's no end of people still living in dreams, in the dim and darkness. Pitiful, sad indeed. So Theosophy shows us that life on earth is really the most transient aspect of our journey, and in many ways, and for most, the worst and most painful, physically, mentally and morally. It is the one stage in which we feel least comfortable. When we move on, we are told that it will be like returning home. We're in places where we feel more at ease with ourselves and all around us. Well, unless we're really an evil person, but for 99.9% of us, we are better off. Sadly, reincarnation and karma propel us back into physical existence to struggle and suffer some more, and hopefully learn through our experiences. But there comes a time of awakening when we can move on to new and exciting realms of being, not vague, dreamy states as they appear to us now with our limited minds, but more vivid and real than our physical life can ever be. And there is no end to all of this as far as we know. And the higher we rise, the more spiritual and beautiful we become, and more alive, because we are becoming life itself. But it has nothing to do with the tools we use on earth, words, thoughts, images. These are left far behind, having fulfilled their task. We also imagine ourselves as having the same form as we have now, and communicating in the same ways. But our forms will be different completely, and modes of communicating on higher levels beyond our present comprehension. Even way beyond our conceptions of telepathy, which we possess on levels not much higher than the one we are on now. So this gives us a deeper insight into what we will become and the potential of to us as human beings on the planet now. All this Theosophy reveals to us. And Theosophy in action is to try and treat our fellow human beings and our fellow creatures with love and respect, and to always try to see the good in others. Try to see the good in others. I'm not saying we can't, often can do that. But think of the Bodhisattva, never despise. We'll all be Buddhas someday. And what may be the duty to ourselves? HPB sums it up in the Key to Theosophy in an answer to a question. To control and conquer through the higher, the lower self. To purify himself inwardly and morally. To fear no one and naught save the tribunal of his own conscience. Never to do a thing by halves. If he thinks it the right thing to do, let him do it openly and boldly, and if wrong, never touch it at all. It is the duty of a theosophist to lighten his burden by thinking of the wise aphorism of Epictetus, who says, "Be not diverted from your duty by any idle reflection the silly world may make upon you, for the censures are not in your power, and consequently should not be any part of your concern." Again, this is pointing to the fact that we should not slavishly follow what materialistic scientists and politicians tell us. We have access to a deeper knowledge and therefore a much wider understanding of the nature of life and being human. So may love and light guide us all upon our journey, and may we all help each other to walk each other along the never-ending path, and who knows where. For as the film says, we are all part of the never-ending story. Thank you.